That night, I learned the hard way that a single phone call can destroy a mother's life in seconds. The silence in my house used to be peaceful, but after that ring, it became a heavy, suffocating blanket that I knew would never lift again. My name is Barbara, I am 59 years old, and I live in Oak Ridge, in the same house where I raised my daughter alone after my husband passed away 12 years ago. This house has 3 bedrooms, a backyard with rose bushes I planted with my own hands, and way too much silence since Sarah married Justin 3 years ago. It was Friday. I remember it was Friday because I had gone to the farmer's market that morning and bought white carnations for the vase in the living room, just like I do every weekend. The afternoon was fading slowly, casting that burnt orange glow you see on the stucco walls here in Oak Ridge when the sun starts dipping behind the hills. I was in the kitchen making rice pudding, the recipe my mother taught me, and that I taught Sarah when she was barely 8 years old. I was using the same enamel pot that has been in this family for 30 years. The phone rang at 6:40 in the evening. When I saw Justin's name on the screen, I smiled. I thought he was calling to invite me to dinner or to tell me that Sarah was finally in labor. My daughter was 37 weeks pregnant. I was just weeks away from meeting my first grandson. "Justin?" I answered, wiping my hands on my apron. "How is my Sarah? Is it time?" What I heard on the other end knocked the wind right out of my lungs. Justin was crying. He was crying with a broken, desperate sound, like a wounded animal. "Mrs. Barbara." His voice was shaking so bad I could barely understand the words. "Come to the hospital, please, come now." What happened? My heart started hammering so hard I could feel the pulse in my temples. "Is Sarah okay? The baby?" "Oak Ridge General Hospital, come quick, please," and he hung up. My hands were trembling when I fished for my car keys. I left the stove on. I left the front door unlocked. I left everything. I could only think of one thing: getting to that hospital, seeing my daughter, hugging her, telling her everything would be okay, just like I had always told her since she was a little girl crying in my arms after a nightmare. The drive from my house to the hospital is barely 15 minutes, but that night it felt like hours. Every red light was an eternity. Every car moving slowly in front of me was an unbearable obstacle. I prayed under my breath, repeating the same words over and over. "Let her be okay. Let her be okay. Let her be okay." I pulled into the hospital parking lot at 7:05 in the evening. I left the car parked crooked, taking up 2 spaces, and ran toward the emergency entrance with my heart about to burst. My shoes clicked loudly against the tile floor. The smell of disinfectant and medicine hit me in the face when I pushed through the glass doors. Justin was in the waiting room. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting in one of those gray plastic chairs, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He was wearing a wrinkled white shirt and dark pants. When I looked up and he saw me running toward him, he stood up. I will never forget the look on his face. His eyes were red, swollen, cheeks wet, hair messy like he had run his hands through it 1,000 times. But there was something else, something in his eyes I couldn't identify in that moment, something that looked like fear. "Justin!" I reached him, gasping for air. "Where is Sarah? What happened? The baby?" He grabbed me by the shoulders. His hands were shaking. "Mrs. Barbara." His voice broke again. "Your daughter. She didn't make it through the delivery." The world stopped. Those words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Sarah was fine. I had spoken to her that very morning on the phone. She had told me she felt mild contractions, that the doctor said it was normal, that the baby would probably be born in the next few days. She was fine. She was... "What are you saying?" My voice came out as a whisper. "No, it can't be." There were complications. Justin looked away. She lost a lot of blood. The doctors did everything possible, but... "I want to see her!" I screamed, not caring that people in the waiting room turned to look at me. "Take me to my daughter right now!" Justin held me tighter when I tried to push past him toward the hallway. "No, Mrs. Barbara, wait." "Let me go!" I tried to break free. "I have to see Sarah!" "You don't want to see her like this," Justin said, and there was something in his tone that made me stop. "Trust me, please. It's better you remember her as she was, how she looked the last time you saw her." I looked him in the eyes, those dark eyes my daughter had loved since they met in college 7 years ago. Those eyes that had seemed sincere when he asked me for Sarah's hand 4 years ago. Those eyes that were now looking at me with a desperate plea. "The baby?" I asked with a thread of a voice. My son-in-law shook his head. He didn't survive either. My knees gave out. Justin caught me before I hit the floor. He helped me sit in one of those cold plastic chairs. I cried uncontrollably, with a pain so deep I felt like my soul was being ripped from my chest. Sarah, my baby girl, my only child, the reason I had gotten up every morning for the last 28 years. "Let me be with her," I begged between sobs. "Just a few minutes, I just want to say goodbye." "It's not a good idea, Mrs. Barbara." Justin knelt in front of me and took my hands. "Believe me, I already saw her and I wouldn't want you to have that image in your memory. Remember her smiling. Remember her alive." There was so much conviction in his voice, so much firmness. But something inside me, something deep, instinctive, maternal, was telling me something wasn't right. It was like a whisper in my mind, a silent alarm starting to ring louder and louder. Why is he blocking me? A mother has the right to see her child, no matter what. "Where is she?" I asked, wiping my tears. "What room?" Justin hesitated for just a second before answering. "In the special care area, room 212, but you can't go in right now. They are preparing her for transport." "Transport?" "To the funeral home," Justin said, lowering his eyes. "Tomorrow morning." I stared at him in silence. I observed every detail of his face, the tears rolling down his cheeks, the tremor in his hands, the way he avoided holding my gaze for more than a few seconds. And then I felt it. That instinct all mothers have. That inner voice that tells us when something is wrong with our children, no matter how old they are or how far away they are. Something was wrong, very wrong. But in that moment, with the pain tearing me apart inside, with the crying choking me, I couldn't think clearly. I could only feel the void, the black hole that had opened in my chest where my heart used to beat. "Take me home," I murmured finally. "Please." "I'll drive you." Justin stood up and helped me rise. "No," I said, drying my tears with the back of my hand. "I can drive. Stay here. Stay with her." Justin nodded. I walked toward the exit like a ghost. My legs moved on their own, mechanically. I went through the glass doors, crossed the parking lot, got into my car, but before starting the engine, I looked toward the hospital building. All the windows were lit. On the second floor, I counted the windows from the left. 1, 2, 3. Room 212 had to be there, behind that window with the curtain drawn. Behind that window was my daughter. Or was she? I started the car and left the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The drive home was in complete silence, no radio, no tears anymore, just that constant buzzing in my head, repeating the same words over and over. Something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong. I arrived home just past 8 at night. The door was still unlocked, just as I had left it. The kitchen light was still on. The rice pudding had burned on the stove. The house smelled of smoke and burnt milk. I turned off the stove. I threw the pot in the trash. I sat in the living room, on the same sofa where I used to sit with Sarah when she was little, and I read her bedtime stories. I looked at the clock, 8:30. I thought about Justin, the way he had stopped me, his words. "You don't want to see her like this. Trust me." Why had he called me Mrs. Barbara so formally, instead of just Barbara or Mom, like he sometimes did playfully? Why hadn't he let me see Sarah even for a second? Why did his eyes show fear instead of just pain? I got up from the sofa. I walked to Sarah's room, the one that had been her bedroom for 25 years before she got married. I still kept her things, her bed, her desk, the photos stuck to the wall. I opened the closet. There were her clothes from when she was a teenager, the dresses I bought for her, the blouses I chose, the shoes I considered appropriate. I ran my hand over the empty hangers, and then I remembered something Sarah had said to me 6 months ago when she came to visit on a Sunday afternoon. We were drinking coffee in the kitchen, and she looked at me with those honey-colored eyes she inherited from her father. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think I've lived my life the way I wanted, or the way you wanted?" I laughed in that moment. I told her not to talk nonsense, that everything I had done was for her own good, to protect her, so she would make the right decisions. She didn't say anything else, just smiled sadly and changed the subject. I closed the closet and left the room. The clock struck 9 at night. I sat down again in the living room. I turned off the lights. I stayed there, in the dark, looking out the window at the empty street. And I made a decision. At midnight, when the whole hospital was quiet, when the nurses were tired and the hallways empty, I would go back. I would go back through the rear corridor, the one leading to the service area, the one I used 5 years ago when my cousin was admitted and I snuck in to see her after visiting hours. I would get to room 212 and see with my own eyes what Justin didn't want me to see, because a mother always knows. And I knew something was terribly wrong. While I waited for the hours to pass until midnight, I sat in the darkness of my living room, remembering how everything had been before this night that split my life in two. Sarah was born on a Thursday in April of 1997. It was raining that morning. I remember my husband Richard driving so fast to the hospital that I had to ask him to slow down, even though contractions were already 3 minutes apart. He was more nervous than I was. He missed the street twice. I laughed through the pain, telling him our baby wasn't going to wait if he kept driving in circles. When the nurse put Sarah in my arms for the first time, I knew my life had changed forever. She weighed 7 pounds, 1 ounce. She had dark hair, eyes closed, and she cried with a force that surprised me, coming from something so small. Richard was crying too, standing by the hospital bed, squeezing my hand. "She's perfect," he whispered. Our Sarah. Our Sarah." We had spent 8 years trying to have a baby. 8 years of doctors, treatments, hopes, and disappointments. I was 31 when I finally got pregnant. Richard was 35. We felt like God had finally heard us. The first years were the most beautiful of my life. I remember Sarah learning to walk on the back porch of this very house, gripping my fingers with her tiny hands. I remember her first words. Mom was the first. Water was the second. Dad was the third. And Richard pretended to be offended for days because he hadn't been first. I remember Sunday mornings when we baked sweetbread together in the kitchen. Sarah would climb on a stool to reach the table and stick her fingers in the dough, getting flour all over her face. Richard took pictures of everything. He said he wanted to remember every moment. I remember afternoons at the park when Sarah was 5 and learned to ride a bike. I ran behind her shouting, "Be careful, not so fast," while Richard laughed and told me to let her be free. I remember her first day of school. She was 6 and so excited she couldn't sleep the night before. I had bought her a new uniform, a pink backpack with flowers, and braided her hair with white ribbons. I walked her to the door of her classroom, and she went in without looking back. So brave, so sure. When I got back home that day, I cried for an hour. Richard hugged me in the kitchen and said, "That's how it has to be. Kids grow up. It's natural." But I didn't want her to grow up. I wanted her to stay small forever. I wanted to protect her from everything. The years passed too quickly. Sarah was a brilliant girl. She got the best grades in her class. She read 3 books a week. She won the spelling bee when she was 9. She learned to play piano. She took ballet classes. I made sure she had everything necessary. I took her to all her activities. I checked her homework every night. I chose her clothes for school every morning. I packed her favorite lunch, ham and cheese sandwiches, apple slices, orange juice. Richard sometimes told me, "Honey, let her pick her own clothes. She's 10 years old." But I knew better than anyone what was appropriate for my daughter. I knew what colors looked good on her. I knew what styles were suitable for a girl her age. When Sarah turned 12, she wanted to dye her hair red. I told her no, that she was too young, that it would look bad, that people would think incorrect things about her. She cried for 2 days. Richard told me to let her do what she wanted with her own hair. "It's just hair," he said. "It'll grow back." "No," I replied. "I won't allow my daughter to look like those girls who wander the streets without any supervision." Richard sighed, but didn't argue further. Sarah never dyed her hair. When she started junior high, she began bringing friends to the house. I watched them carefully. I listened to their conversations. Some of those girls wore clothes that were too tight. Others used swear words. One of them smoked cigarettes in secret in the school bathroom. I told Sarah she couldn't hang out with them. "But Mom, they're my friends," she protested. "Bad company ruins good morals," I replied. "I know what's best for you." Sarah stopped inviting friends over. Richard pulled me aside one night after dinner. "Barbara, you're isolating her," he said with concern. "She needs friends. She needs to socialize." "She has friends," I answered. "The right ones? The ones you approve of?" Richard asked. "And how many are there?" I didn't answer because I knew the answer. 2. Just 2 girls who came from families I considered appropriate. Quiet, polite girls who wore modest clothes and got good grades. Boring girls probably, but safe. When Sarah was 14, a boy from her school sent her a letter. I found it in her backpack when I was checking that she had done all her homework. The letter said sweet, silly things, like the things boys that age say. But it also said he thought Sarah was pretty, that he wanted to invite her to the movies. When Sarah got home from school that day, I was waiting for her in the living room with the letter in my hand. "What is this?" I asked. Her face went pale. "Mom, I didn't ask him to write to me." "Do you know this boy?" "He's in my class." "Have you spoken to him?" "Just in class, when we work in teams." "I don't want you to speak to him ever again," I said firmly. "You are too young for this nonsense. You have to focus on your studies." Sarah clenched her fists. "Mom, he just wrote me a letter." "And that is exactly how it starts," I replied. "First it's a letter, then phone calls. Then they want you to go out with them. And before you realize it, you've ruined your entire life." "You don't trust me," Sarah yelled with tears in her eyes. "I trust you," I said calmly. "I don't trust boys." I tore the letter up in front of her. I watched her cry in her room for hours. That night, Richard waited for me in our bedroom. "You ripped up the letter in front of her," he said, without looking at me. "I did what I had to do," I replied while putting on my nightgown. "Someday she'll thank me." Richard stayed quiet for a long while. Then he said, "Do you remember when we met? You were 17, I was 18. Your mom didn't want you going out with me." "That's different," I said. "You were different." "Why?" Richard asked. "Because your mother finally let you make your own decisions." I didn't answer. I went to bed and turned off the light. Richard didn't bring up the topic again, but that night, lying in the dark, I thought about my mother, how strict she had been with me, how she had forbidden me from doing so many things, how I had sworn I would be different with my own children. And yet, there I was, doing exactly the same thing. But I had reasons, good reasons. The world was dangerous. Boys only wanted one thing. The wrong friends could ruin a girl's future. I was just protecting Sarah from making the mistakes others made. Was that wrong? When Sarah turned 17, Richard died. It was a massive heart attack at the office. A Wednesday afternoon. He was 47. There were no warnings, no time to say goodbye. One moment he was alive, working, making plans for the weekend. The next moment, he was gone. Sarah and I were left alone. The pain was unbearable. For months, I couldn't even get out of bed. Sarah was the one who brought me food, who made sure I took my depression medication, who paid the bills with Richard's life insurance money. She was 17 and had to become an adult overnight. When I could finally function again, when the pain became something I could live with instead of something that drowned me, I realized something terrifying. Sarah was all I had left. She was my only family, my only reason to get up every morning. If I lost her too. So I held on tighter. When Sarah told me she wanted to study architecture in college, I told her accounting was a more practical major, safer, with more job opportunities. She said she had wanted to be an architect since she was 12, that she dreamed of designing beautiful buildings. I told her dreams don't pay the bills, that accounting would give her stability, that she could trust my experience. Sarah enrolled in accounting. When she met Justin in her sophomore year, I immediately distrusted him. He was too handsome, too sure of himself. He came from a family with money, studied business administration, had plans to open his own company. Men like that are only looking for one thing, I told Sarah when she told me about him. They aren't serious. They aren't reliable. "Mom, you don't even know him," Sarah protested. "I know his type," I replied. But Sarah didn't listen to me this time. She kept seeing him, secretly at first, then openly, defying me. When she formally introduced me to him 6 months later, I had to admit Justin was polite, respectful, called me Mrs. Barbara, and brought flowers every time he came to the house. But I still didn't trust him. When he asked me for Sarah's hand 2 years later, I set conditions. "I want you to live in Oak Ridge," I said, "near me, so I can be close to my daughter." Justin accepted. They bought a house 15 minutes from mine. I visited 3 or 4 times a week. I made sure Sarah was okay, that Justin treated her correctly, that the house was clean and tidy. Sometimes when I arrived unannounced, I noticed Sarah seemed tired, tense. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I would ask. "Yes, Mom," she always answered, "just tired from work." Sarah worked at an accounting firm. She didn't like it. I knew that even though she never said it directly. But she had a stable job, with a good salary, with benefits. That was what mattered. When she told me she was pregnant 8 months ago, I cried with happiness. "I'm going to be a grandmother," I whispered, hugging her. "Finally." Sarah smiled, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. During the pregnancy, I was with her constantly. I accompanied her to all her doctor appointments. I bought her maternity clothes. I decorated the baby's room with my own hands. I chose the colors, the furniture, every detail. "Mom, Justin and I want to pick out some things too," Sarah said one day. "I already picked everything," I replied. "Don't worry, I know what a baby needs." Sarah didn't argue. 2 weeks ago, when I saw her for the last time before this horrible night, we were sitting in her living room drinking chamomile tea. She was stroking her swollen belly with her hands. "What are you thinking about?" I asked her. Sarah looked at me for a long moment before answering. "I'm thinking about what kind of mother I'm going to be," she said finally. "You'll be a wonderful mother," I assured her. "I'll teach you everything you need to know." Something crossed her face, something I couldn't identify. "Mom," she said softly, "do you think that you gave me space to be myself?" The question took me by surprise. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I gave you everything. I gave you the best education, the best opportunities. I protected you from everything bad." "I know," Sarah said, looking toward the window. "I know." But there was sadness in her voice, a deep sadness that I didn't understand at that moment. Now, sitting in the dark of my living room, waiting for midnight to arrive, I remembered that conversation. I remembered all the conversations, all the times Sarah had tried to tell me something and I hadn't listened. I looked at the clock. 11:30. Half an hour more. I got up and went to my room. I changed my clothes for something dark, black pants, black sweater, comfortable shoes. I looked for a small flashlight in the kitchen drawer, took the car keys, and waited. At 11:55, I left my house in silence, like a thief in the night. But I wasn't going to steal anything. I was going to find the truth. The hospital at midnight was a completely different place. I parked my car 3 blocks away, on a dark side street where I knew there wouldn't be security cameras. I walked slowly toward the building, staying close to the trees lining the sidewalk. The December air was cold, and my breath formed small white clouds every time I exhaled. The hospital lights shone like a lighthouse in the darkness, but most of the windows were dark. Only the emergency and intensive care areas remained lit. The main parking lot was almost empty. I counted barely 5 cars. I didn't go in through the main door. I circled the building to the east side, where the loading dock is. That's where trucks bring medical supplies during the day. That's where the service door leading to the maintenance corridor is. That door is never locked because the nurses use it to go out for a smoke during their night shifts. I learned that 5 years ago. I pushed the metal door. It opened with a soft squeak. I went in. The maintenance corridor smelled of chlorine and industrial detergent. The walls were concrete painted white, stained in some parts with moisture marks. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling. My shoes echoed against the cement floor. I walked fast but without running. If anyone saw me, I'd say I was a patient's relative, that I got lost looking for the bathroom, that I was confused. At the end of the corridor was a door leading to the service stairs. I opened it and started to climb. First floor. Second floor. Room 212 was on the second floor, north wing. I exited the stairs into a dimly lit hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally. The floor was worn linoleum, a pattern of gray and white squares. The smell here was different. Medicine, sickness, antiseptic. I advanced, hugging the wall, stopping every time I heard footsteps or voices. I passed room 201, 203, 205. The nurse's station was at the end of the hall, right before room 212. I saw two nurses sitting behind the counter, one typing on a computer and the other checking folders. They spoke in low voices about something related to medication. I hid behind a cleaning cart left in the hallway, waiting. My heart was beating so loud I feared they might hear it. One of the phones at the station rang. The nurse at the computer answered. I heard fragments of the conversation. Yes, room 115. I'm heading there now. The nurse got up and walked toward the other end of the hall, away from me. The other nurse yawned, stretched in her chair, and then got up too. I'm going for coffee, she told her colleague's empty chair. You want anything? Bring me a hot chocolate, the other answered from down the hall. The second nurse walked in the opposite direction, toward the main stairs leading to the basement cafeteria. The station was empty. I moved fast, left my hiding spot, and walked directly toward room 212. The door was ajar. There was no light on inside, only the faint glow entering from the hallway. I stopped right before entering. My hand was shaking when I reached for the door handle. What was I going to find in there? My daughter's body, cold and lifeless, covered with a white sheet? Tears started rolling down my cheeks before I could stop them. No, I told myself. Control yourself. You need to see. You need to know. I took a deep breath. I pushed the door a little more, enough to see inside. The room was in shadows. There was a bed in the center with the medical curtains partially drawn, monitors off. An empty chair by the window, a rolling table with a water pitcher. And in the bed, I squinted, trying to see better in the dark. There was a shape under the sheets, a shape the size of a person. I took a step inside the room, then another. My breathing was so loud it seemed to fill the whole space. I was 2 feet from the bed when I heard it, a sound, a sob, coming from the bathroom of the room. The bathroom door was closed, but I could see light filtering underneath. I froze. Then I heard voices, 2 voices. One was Justin's. I recognized it immediately. The other was a woman's, a woman who sounded exactly like my daughter. I can't take this anymore, the woman's voice said between sobs. I can't go on like this. Just a little longer, my love, Justin answered softly. Just until tomorrow, then we'll be free. What if she comes? What if she comes back and finds me here? She won't come. I told her not to enter, trust me. I've endured 28 years of her controlling every aspect of my life, Justin. Every decision, every choice. Choosing my career, my clothes, my friends. I couldn't even breathe without her telling me how to do it. My blood froze. That was Sarah. Sarah was alive. Alive and talking about me. I know, honey, Justin said. That's why we did this, so you could be free. But lying to her like this, telling her I died, it was the only way. You said it yourself. If we told her the truth, if we told her we wanted to leave, that we wanted to start over far from here, she wouldn't have let us go. She would have found a way to stop us, to control you again. Sarah was crying harder now. I know you're right, I know, but it hurts. It hurts more than I thought it would. Tomorrow morning we leave for Seattle, Justin said. I have everything ready. The apartment is already rented. My job transfer is approved. Nobody knows us there. We can start from scratch. You, me, and our baby, our own family. And my mother? What's going to happen to her when she finds out we lied? There was a long silence. She'll be okay, Justin said finally. Eventually. She'll be hurt, she'll be angry, but she'll be okay. And you You will finally be able to live your own life. I was so close to the bathroom door I could hear every word with perfect clarity. Each word was like a knife burying itself in my chest. I've endured 28 years of her controlling every aspect of my life. Is that what Sarah thought of me? That I had controlled her? I just wanted to protect her. I wanted to make sure she made the right decisions, that she didn't make mistakes that would ruin her life. That wasn't control, that was love, wasn't it? I backed away from the bathroom door with clumsy movements, tripping over my own feet. My back hit the rolling table and the water pitcher wobbled, making a metallic clatter. The voices inside the bathroom stopped immediately. "What was that?" Sarah asked with a terrified voice. "Stay here," Justin said. I heard his footsteps approaching the bathroom door. I didn't think, I just acted. I ran out of the room. My feet flew over the linoleum hallway. I passed the empty nurse's station, turned the corner. I pushed the service stair door so hard it banged against the wall with a crash. I went down the stairs 2 at a time, gripping the railing not to fall. First floor, maintenance corridor, service door. I burst out into the freezing night air, gasping, heart about to explode. I kept running until I reached my car. I locked myself inside. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands and cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since Richard died, but these tears were different. Richard had died from natural causes, a heart attack, something no one could prevent or control. This was different. Sarah had chosen to do this to me. She had planned to fake her own death. She had planned to break my heart. She had planned to disappear from my life forever. And the reason was me. I've endured 28 years of her controlling every aspect of my life. I sat in my car for I don't know how long. Could have been an hour, could have been 3. Time had lost all meaning. When I could finally breathe without my chest hurting, when the tears finally dried, I started the engine and drove home. The dashboard clock read 2:37 in the morning. I drove on autopilot, not really thinking about the road. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, memories, revelations. I remembered every time I had chosen Sarah's clothes when she was a child. "It's for your own good. This color looks better on you." I remembered every time I had rejected her friends. "Those girls aren't a good influence." I remembered when I forbade her from dyeing her hair. "I won't allow my daughter to look like those girls." I remembered when I found that boy's letter and ripped it up in front of her. "You're too young for this nonsense." I remembered when I told her to study accounting instead of architecture. Dreams don't pay the bills. I remembered the 3 or 4 visits a week to her house after she got married. "I just want to make sure you're okay." I remembered how I decorated her baby's room without asking her what she wanted. I already picked everything. I know what a baby needs. Every memory was like a piece of a puzzle finally starting to form a clear picture. A picture I didn't like. A picture of a mother who had loved her daughter so much she had suffocated her. A mother who had been so afraid of losing her that she had locked her in a golden cage. A mother who had called it protection when in reality it was control. I arrived home just as the sky was beginning to lighten with the first shades of dawn. Sunday morning. It had barely been 8 hours since Justin had called to tell me Sarah had died. 8 hours that had changed everything. I entered my house and closed the door behind me. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked in the dark to the living room and sat in the same armchair where I had sat the night before. But now, everything was different. Now I knew the truth. Sarah was alive. My grandson was alive. They were going to Seattle. They were going to disappear. They were going to build a new life where I couldn't find them, where I couldn't control them. I could call the police. I could go to the hospital right now and confront them. I could scream and cry and demand explanations. I could force them to stay. But if I did that, would I be any different from everything I had done before? Would I still be controlling Sarah's life even now, knowing the pain I had caused her for 28 years? I got up from the chair and walked to Sarah's room. I opened the closet. All those clothes I had chosen for her. Dresses I considered appropriate. Colors I thought looked good on her. Styles I approved. I ran my hand over the hangers. How many times had Sarah wanted to wear something different and I had told her no? How many times had she wanted to be herself and I had forced her to do what I wanted her to be? I closed the closet and sat on her bed. This room was exactly as she had left it when she got married 3 years ago. Her desk, her books, the photos on the wall. But looking at it now, I realized something. There was nothing of Sarah here. No architectural drawings, even though she had liked drawing buildings since she was a child. No photos with her college friends, the ones she never introduced me to because she knew I wouldn't approve. There was nothing to show who she really was. There was only what I had allowed her to be. I sat there as the sun rose completely, filling the room with golden light, and for the first time in 28 years, I really saw my daughter. Not the daughter I had created in my mind, not the perfect and obedient daughter I had molded, but the real woman who had been trapped all this time, waiting to be free. A woman who had to fake her own death to escape me. The pain of that realization was worse than anything I had felt before. Worse than when Richard died, because Richard died from something out of my control. But this was entirely my fault. I spent all of Sunday sitting in that room. I didn't eat, I didn't drink water, I didn't move. I just stayed there, surrounded by the ghosts of all the decisions I had made for Sarah over the years. The sun moved slowly across the sky, changing the angle of the light coming through the window. I could see dust motes floating in the golden rays. There was absolute silence in the house, interrupted only by the ticking of the wall clock in the hallway. My phone rang 4 times during the day. All 4 times, it was Justin. I didn't answer. What was I going to tell him? That I knew the truth? That I had heard everything? That my daughter had preferred to make me believe she was dead rather than continue living near me? Every time the phone rang, I watched it vibrate on Sarah's nightstand until it stopped. Then came the voicemail notification sound. I didn't listen to them. I didn't want to hear Justin's voice feigning pain, pretending he had lost his wife, lying with every word. Although, did I have the right to judge him for lying? Me, who had spent 28 years lying to myself, telling myself that everything I did was for Sarah's good, that my decisions were the right ones, that my love justified my control. When the sun began to set, I finally got out of bed. My legs were numb from sitting in the same position for hours. I walked with difficulty to the kitchen, holding on to the walls. I opened the refrigerator. The light hurt my eyes. Inside was food I had prepared days ago, a chicken casserole, leftover rolls. I closed the fridge without taking anything out. I wasn't hungry. I didn't know if I would ever be hungry again. I filled a glass with tap water and drank it standing by the sink, looking out the window toward the backyard. The rose bushes I had planted when Sarah was little grew wild against the stucco wall. They needed pruning. I had neglected them for months. I had neglected many things while concentrating obsessively on my daughter's life. I left the glass in the sink and walked to the living room. I sat in the armchair. I picked up the remote control. I turned on the TV. The evening news showed the weather forecast. Colder temperatures for next week, chance of rain. The reporter spoke enthusiastically about the Christmas decorations downtown. Christmas. In less than a week, it would be Christmas. Last year, Sarah and Justin had come to dinner at my house on Christmas Eve. I had prepared the whole menu myself. I rejected Sarah's offer to bring a dish. "Don't worry, sweetie. I'll handle everything. You just come and enjoy." I remember Sarah had barely tasted the food. She said she had nausea from early pregnancy, even though she was only 6 weeks along and nausea typically started later. Now I wondered if it had really been pregnancy nausea, or if it had been the nausea of having to sit at my table, in my house, under my control. I turned off the TV again. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. My phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Justin. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered without thinking. "Mrs. Barbara?" It was a woman's voice, professional. "This is Nurse Miller from Oak Ridge General Hospital." My heart started beating faster. "Yes," I replied with a tense voice. "I'm sorry to bother you at this hour. Your son-in-law, Mr. Justin, gave us your number as an emergency contact. We need you to come to the hospital to sign some documents related to your daughter." I closed my eyes. Of course, the fake funeral needed fake paperwork. "What kind of documents?" I asked. "The death certificate needs to be signed by a direct relative. There are also forms for the release of the body to the funeral home." Every word was a lie elaborated to maintain the charade. "Can you come tomorrow morning?" the nurse asked. "Say at 9? I could say no. I could deny everything. I could go to the hospital right now and tell the whole world that my daughter was alive. But then I thought about Sarah's words, heard through the bathroom door. I've endured 28 years of her controlling every aspect of my life. If I forced her to stay now, if I ruined her escape plan, would it be any different from all the other times I had made her decisions for her? "I'll be there at 9, I said finally. "Thank you, Mrs. Barbara. I am so sorry for your loss." She hung up. I stayed with the phone in my hand, looking at the dark screen. What was I doing? Why was I allowing this to continue? Because deep down, in the darkest part of my heart, I knew the answer. If I signed those documents, if I played along, if I let Sarah go, maybe, just maybe, I was finally doing something good for her, something she had chosen, something that would give her the freedom I had never given her in 28 years. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, looking at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the creaking of wooden beams, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind tapping gently against the windows. I thought about all the nights Sarah had spent in this house when she was a child, when she was a teenager, when she was a young woman dreaming of being an architect. How many of those nights had she stayed awake wishing she were anywhere else? How many times had she looked out her bedroom window, dreaming of escaping? At 6 in the morning on Sunday, I got up and prepared to go to the hospital. I showered, dressed in dark clothes, appropriate for a mother who had just lost her daughter. Black pants, dark gray blouse, a wool sweater. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back was 59, but looked much older. Deep circles, wrinkles around the eyes I hadn't noticed before, gray hairs I had been putting off dyeing. When had I gotten so old? I looked away from the mirror. I didn't eat breakfast, just drank black coffee, standing in the kitchen, watching the wall clock tick slowly toward 8:30. At 8:45, I left my house. The drive to the hospital was silent. The streets were quiet, Sunday morning. Most people were still sleeping or getting ready for church. I used to go to church every Sunday. I took Sarah with me since she was a baby. She sat next to me, still and quiet, hands folded in her lap. The perfect girl, the obedient daughter, the trapped woman. I arrived at the hospital at 5 minutes to 9. I parked in the same spot where I had parked Friday night when Justin called me for the first time. It seemed like years had passed since then, not just 2 days. I entered through the main door this time. No maintenance corridor, no subterfuge. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Barbara," she said with a soft, compassionate voice, "I am so sorry. Nurse Miller is waiting for you. 3rd floor, administrative office." I nodded without speaking. I took the elevator. The doors closed and it started to rise with a mechanical hum. I stared at the lit numbers above the door. 1, 2, 3. The doors opened. The 3rd floor was completely different from the 2nd. Here, there was no smell of medicine or sickness. It was more like a normal office. Tile floors, beige walls, potted plants by the windows. A woman in her 40s, dressed in scrubs, approached me. "Mrs. Barbara?" "Yes." "I'm Nurse Miller. Thank you for coming. I know this must be very difficult for you." She guided me down a hallway to a small office. Inside was a desk, 2 chairs, and a metal filing cabinet. "Please, sit down," she said, pointing to a chair. I sat. The nurse sat behind the desk and pulled a manila folder from a drawer. "These are the documents we need you to sign," she said, opening the folder. "The death certificate, the authorization form for transport, and some insurance papers." She pushed the documents toward me across the desk. I looked at them without touching them. Everything was there, printed on official paper with the hospital logo. Death certificate. Name, Sarah Ramirez. Date of birth, April 19th, 1997. Date of death, December 28th, 2025. Cause of death, complications during childbirth, postpartum hemorrhage. Everything was fake. Every word was a lie, but it was printed on official paper, with stamps and signatures from doctors that Justin had probably bribed or who simply hadn't verified the facts. "Do you need a moment?" the nurse asked kindly. "No," I said. "I'm fine." I took the pen she offered. My hand shook as I brought it to the paper. A signature, that was all it took. One signature and Sarah would be officially dead. One signature and she would be free. Free of me, free of 28 years of control, free to live the life she had always wanted to live. I pressed the pen tip against the paper and signed, "Barbara Estrada, widow of Ramirez." My name looked strange in that context, next to the words "mother of the deceased." I signed the second document, the third, the fourth. Each signature was easier than the last. When I finished, I pushed the documents back toward the nurse. "Done," I said. The nurse checked them quickly, ensuring all signatures were in place. "Perfect," she said. "The funeral home will pick up the body this afternoon. Do you have the service arranged?" The body, as if Sarah were really dead, as if there were a body to pick up. "Yes," I lied. "Everything is arranged." "Very good." The nurse closed the folder. "Once again, I am so sorry for your loss. If you need to speak with someone, a counselor or a chaplain, the hospital offers support services for grieving families." Support for grieving families? How could I be grieving for someone I knew was alive, and yet I was grieving? Not for Sarah's death, but for the death of our relationship, for the death of the image I had of myself as a good mother, for the death of 28 years of illusions. "Thank you," I said, getting up. "That won't be necessary." I left the office. I walked down the hall to the elevators, pressed the button to go down. The doors opened and I stepped in. Just before the doors closed, I saw someone at the end of the hall. Justin. He saw me. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. He looked tired, guilty, scared, but he said nothing, and neither did I. The elevator doors closed. I went down in silence. I walked out of the hospital through the main door. I walked toward my car under the bright Sunday morning sun, and as I drove back to my house, I realized something. I had just signed my daughter's death certificate. I had just helped Sarah disappear from my life forever. And the strangest thing of all was that, for the first time in 28 years, I felt like I had finally done something she really wanted. Something she had chosen, not me. Sometimes we trust too much that we know what is best for the people we love. Have you also had to learn to let go? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read it. I arrived home near noon. The silence greeted me as always, but this time it was different. It was no longer the comfortable silence of a house inhabited by one person. It was the silence of a tomb, of an empty space where there once was life. I left the keys on the table by the door and walked directly to the kitchen. I needed to do something with my hands, something normal, something to make me feel I still had control over some aspect of my life. I opened the fridge and took out vegetables, tomatoes, onions, peppers. I was going to make salsa like I did every Sunday, a routine I had kept for years. But when I started chopping the tomatoes, my hands shook so much I had to leave the knife on the cutting board. I stood there, looking at the uncut vegetables, hands leaning on the edge of the counter. What had I done? I had signed the death certificate of my living daughter. I had helped perpetuate a lie. I had allowed Sarah to erase me from her life as if I had never existed. But what other choice did I have? If I stopped her, if I revealed the truth, I would be controlling her once again. I would be making another decision for her. I would be demonstrating exactly why she had felt she needed to fake her death to escape me. The phone rang. I took it out of my pocket. It was Justin again. This time, I answered. Mrs. Barbara. His voice sounded tense, nervous. Thank you for going to the hospital. I didn't answer. I know it must be very difficult for you, he continued. I just wanted to tell you that the funeral service will be tomorrow, Monday afternoon, at Oakwood Memorial Chapel at 3 p.m. A fake funeral for a fake death. Will there be a viewing? I asked with a flat voice. Justin hesitated. No, I decided it would be better, less painful to have just a brief service, no open casket, of course, because there was no body to view. And after, I asked, cremation? Yes, Justin replied quickly, cremation, and I will keep the ashes that would never exist. I understand, I said. There was a long, awkward silence. Mrs. Barbara, Justin said finally with a broken voice, I am so sorry for all this. I know there are no words that can. No, I interrupted him. There aren't. I hung up. I stayed with the phone in my hand for several minutes, looking at the screen. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the bottom drawer of the living room cabinet where I kept old photo albums. There were 3 thick albums with worn leather covers. I took the first one and brought it to the armchair. I opened it on my lap. The first pages showed photos of my wedding with Richard. I was 22, he was 26. We both smiled with that naive joy of someone who believes life will always be easy. I turned the pages slowly. Our honeymoon in Florida. Richard with his feet in the sand. Me in a white cotton dress, holding hands in front of the ocean. The house we bought in Oak Ridge, small, modest, but ours. Richard painting the walls, me planting the rose bushes in the yard. The years of trying to have a baby. There were no photos of that, of course, but I remembered every doctor appointment, every treatment, every negative pregnancy test, every month of hope followed by disappointment. Then, finally, the photo of the positive test. Richard had taken it. It was just a blurry image of two pink lines on a small plastic stick, but I had kept it in the album as if it were the most valuable treasure in the world. I turned the page. Sarah newborn, wrapped in a pale pink blanket, eyes closed, round cheeks. Richard holding her as delicately as if he feared she would break. Me holding her. My face showed a love so pure, so absolute, it almost hurt to look at it now. When had that love turned into control? At what moment had I crossed the line between protecting and suffocating? I kept turning pages. Sarah at 6 months, sitting up for the first time. At a year, taking her first wobbly steps. At 2, face covered in cake on her birthday. At 3, 4, 5, and in every photo, I was there. Always close, always vigilant, always present, maybe too present. I reached a photo that made me stop. Sarah was 8, we were at the park. She was on the swings, pumping high, hair flying behind her. Her mouth was open in a laugh. Her eyes shone with pure joy. And behind her, barely visible at the edge of the photo, was me. I wasn't smiling. I was watching her with a look of worry, hands reached out, ready to catch her if she fell. Even in a moment of pure joy for her, I was there, worried, controlling, unable to let her be free. I closed the album, took out the second one. This covered Sarah's teenage years. The photos were less frequent here. Adolescence had been hard. Sarah had become quieter, more withdrawn. I had thought it was normal, that all teenagers went through that phase of wanting privacy. Now I wondered if it wasn't because every time she tried to express herself, I shut her down. I found a photo of her middle school graduation. She was 15, wearing her school uniform and holding her certificate. Smiling, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Behind her was her classroom, decorated with balloons. Her classmates were celebrating in the background, but Sarah was alone in the foreground of the photo, because I had pulled her aside to take the picture. Away from the noise, away from her classmates, away from the fun. I turned more pages. Her first day of college, she was 18. Standing in front of the business building, not smiling at all in this photo. I remembered that day perfectly. Sarah had wanted to enroll in architecture. She had filled out all the applications. She had taken the entrance exams. And I had told her no. Architecture is unstable. There are very few jobs. It takes years to get established. Accounting is safe. There will always be work for an accountant. She had cried. She had begged. And I had stood firm. Someday you'll thank me. But she never thanked me. She just submitted, as always. I kept looking at photos. Sarah at her 20th birthday party, 21, 22. In every photo she looked more and more dimmed, as if some of her inner light was slowly extinguishing. And I, in my blindness, hadn't seen it. Or maybe I had seen it and just didn't want to admit it. I reached the most recent photos. Her wedding to Justin 3 years ago. Sarah wore a simple white dress, elegant but not flashy. I had chosen it, of course. Justin was by her side, holding her hand. They looked happy. But now, looking closer, I could see tension in Sarah's shoulders. I could see how her fingers gripped the bouquet of white flowers too tightly. There was a photo of the 3 of us together that day. Richard had been dead 6 years by then, so it was just the 3 of us, Sarah, Justin, and me. I was in the middle with an arm around Sarah, smiling widely at the camera. Sarah was looking to the side, not at the camera, like she wanted to be anywhere else. I closed the second album. I didn't want to open the third. I knew it contained recent photos of Sarah's pregnancy, of the visits to her house, of all the times I had invaded her space, her life, her marriage. I put the albums back in the drawer. It was 3 in the afternoon already. Sunday moved slowly. I walked to the living room window and looked out. The street was empty. Some houses had Christmas decorations, colored lights, wreaths on doors, lit trees visible through windows. My house had no decorations this year. I hadn't had the spirit to put up the Christmas tree. I had planned to do it this week, thinking Sarah would come to help me like she did every year. But Sarah wouldn't be coming this year, or next, or ever again. The phone rang again. This time it was a number I did recognize. My sister Linda lived in Phoenix. We talked once a week, usually Sundays. I answered. "Linda." "Barbara," she said with her usual cheerful voice. "How are you? We haven't talked in—" "Sarah died," I said bluntly. There was absolute silence on the other end. "What?" Linda's voice was barely a whisper. "What did you say?" "Sarah, my daughter, died during childbirth Friday night." "No, it can't be. Barbara, oh my God." I heard her crying for a niece who was actually alive, whom she would see grow from a distance, but with whom she had never been very close, because I had always kept Sarah away from the extended family too. "The funeral is tomorrow," I continued with a monotone voice, "at 3 in the afternoon. Oakwood Memorial Chapel." "I'm coming there right now," Linda said between sobs. "I'll catch a flight and—" "No," I interrupted, "don't come." "What? Barbara, you're my sister. Sarah was my niece. Of course I'm going to—" "I don't want you to come," I said firmly. "I want to be alone. Please, Linda, respect my decision. Just this once. Respect what I am asking." There was another silence. "Okay," she said finally with a small voice. "If that's what you need. But I'll be here if you need me. Call me whenever, anytime." "Thanks," I said. I hung up before she could say anything else. I couldn't have Linda here. I couldn't have anyone here. I couldn't maintain this lie in front of my family. It was hard enough maintaining it in front of myself. The rest of Sunday passed in a fog. I tried to eat, but everything tasted like ash. I tried to watch TV, but couldn't focus on anything. I tried to read, but the words blurred on the page. Finally, when the sun set and darkness filled the house, I sat in the living room without turning on the lights, and I thought about the funeral that would be tomorrow. A funeral without a body. A memorial service for someone who was alive. Should I go? Justin clearly expected me to. He had scheduled the service. He had made all the arrangements. If I didn't go, people would suspect. They would ask why the mother didn't attend her own daughter's funeral. But if I went, I would have to stand in front of an empty casket. I would have to receive condolences for a death that hadn't happened. I would have to fake a grief that, ironically, I felt anyway, but for completely different reasons. I would have to lie. Just like Sarah had had to lie for years about who she really was, about what she really wanted, about how she really felt. Maybe it was appropriate. Maybe it was my punishment. At 11 at night, I went up to my room. I lay on the bed without changing clothes, and for the first time since Friday, when I got Justin's call, I let the tears flow freely. I cried for my daughter. Not for the daughter I had lost to death, but for the daughter I had lost in life. The daughter I had suffocated with my love. The daughter who had to fake her death to finally be able to live. While I tell all this, I wonder where you are listening from. Write the name of your city in the comments. Monday dawned gray and cold. I woke up at 6 in the morning without having really slept. I had only closed my eyes for hours, floating in that state between wakefulness and sleep, where thoughts become nightmares and nightmares feel real. I got out of bed and stood by the window, looking at the leaden sky. looked like rain. The air had that heavy humidity that precedes a storm. A funeral in the rain for a daughter who wasn't dead. How perfectly symbolic. I got ready slowly for the day. I showered with almost cold water, wanting to feel something, anything other than this void consuming me inside. I dressed completely in black, black pants, black blouse, a black wool coat I hadn't worn since Richard's funeral 12 years ago. I looked in the bathroom mirror while brushing my hair. The grays had taken almost complete control of my head. My face was gaunt, deep violet circles under my eyes. I looked exactly like what I was supposed to be. A mother who had just lost her only child. Except the truth was much more complicated than that. I went down to the kitchen and made coffee. The aroma filled the house, bringing memories of all the mornings Sarah had spent here. As a child, sitting at the kitchen table while I made her breakfast before school. As a teenager, drinking her coffee with too much sugar while reviewing notes before an exam. As an adult, visiting me on Sundays, drinking coffee with me while I told her about my week. We always drank coffee together. Now I drank coffee alone, and I would always be alone from now on. The kitchen clock read 7:30. The funeral was at 3. Still 7.5 hours. 7.5 hours to decide if I was really going. 7.5 hours to decide if I was going to keep perpetuating this lie. I drank my coffee standing by the window, looking at the backyard. The rose bushes moved with the wind. The clouds got darker. The first drop of rain hit the window pane, then another, and another. In minutes, the rain was falling hard, hitting the roof with a constant thundering noise. I stood there for an hour, just watching the rain, lost in thoughts that went in circles without reaching any conclusion. At 9 in the morning, the phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Mrs. Barbara Estrada?" asked a professional male voice. "Yes?" "This is the director of Oakwood Memorial Chapel. I'm sorry to bother you at this difficult time. Just wanted to confirm that your daughter's service is still scheduled for 3 p.m. "My daughter's service?" The fake funeral. "Yes," I replied, "at 3. "Perfect. Mr. Justin already made all the arrangements. We have the main hall prepared. Do you expect many attendees?" Attendees? I hadn't thought about that. Sarah didn't have many friends. I had made sure of that over the years. I had driven away people who tried to get close to her. I had criticized anyone who didn't meet my impossible standards. "Not many," I said. "It will be intimate." "I understand. We have prepared a simple but elegant floral arrangement, white roses and lilies. We hope it is to your liking." White roses and lilies, flowers for an empty casket. "I'm sure it will be fine," I said in a monotone voice. "If you need anything else, don't hesitate to call. We are here to support you in everything." He hung up. I stayed with the phone in my hand, looking at the screen. Everything was in motion now. The fake funeral was planned. The flowers were ordered. The room was prepared. All that was missing was for me to show up and pretend. Pretend pain for a death that hadn't happened. Pretend not to know my daughter was alive somewhere, probably packing to go to Seattle. Pretend to be the shattered mother instead of the mother who had caused all this. At 11 in the morning, I decided I needed to get out of the house. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. The silence was deafening. I put on a coat and grabbed an umbrella. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. I went out and walked aimlessly through the streets of Oak Ridge. I passed the elementary school where Sarah had studied. The 2-story building with yellow brick walls. I remembered taking her there every morning for 6 years, holding her hand, making sure she had everything, checking her uniform was spotless. I never let her walk alone, even when we lived just 3 blocks away. It's dangerous, anything could happen. But the truth was, I didn't trust her to take care of herself. I didn't trust her to make the right decisions without my supervision. I kept walking. I passed the park where we used to go on weekends. The swings were empty, swaying gently in the wind. I remembered all the afternoons I spent there with Sarah when she was little. But I also remembered how, when she was 8 or 9, she started asking me to let her go to the park with her friends. Without me? No, I want to spend time with you. It's you and me. Now I realized it wasn't that I wanted to spend time with her, it was that I didn't want her to spend time without me. I didn't want her to have experiences I couldn't control, moments I couldn't supervise. I had isolated her, and I had called it love. I arrived at the downtown florist. Even on a rainy Monday it was busy. I stopped in front of the counter. The lady who ran it recognized me. I bought flowers here every week. "Mrs. Barbara," she said with a smile that vanished when she saw my expression. "Are you okay?" "I need flowers for a funeral," I said, interrupting her. Her face filled with immediate compassion. "Oh, I am so sorry. Someone close?" "My daughter." The woman put a hand to her mouth, eyes filling with instant tears. "No, Sarah? The one who was pregnant?" "She died during childbirth," I said with the voice I had practiced, void of emotion. "Friday night." My God, my God." The woman came out from behind the counter and hugged me. "I have no words. I can't imagine." I stood stiff in her embrace. I couldn't hug back. I couldn't accept comfort based on a lie. I pulled away gently. "I need a bouquet," I said, "something simple." The woman nodded, wiping her tears. "Of course, I'll prepare something beautiful for you, no charge. Please, let me do this for you." She began selecting flowers with trembling hands, white carnations, daisies, small cream roses. Watching her work, I realized something. This woman, whom I barely knew beyond buying flowers from her, showed more genuine emotion for Sarah's supposed death than I did. Because she believed Sarah was dead, and I knew she was alive. But the pain I felt was just as real, just different. "Here you go," the woman said, handing me a beautiful bouquet wrapped in white paper. "The freshest flowers I have for your girl." Her girl. Sarah was 28, married, about to be a mother. But to me, she had always been my little girl. My girl who had to be protected, guided, controlled. "Thank you," I whispered, taking the bouquet. I walked out of the shop with the flowers in my arms, walking under the drizzle. It was 12:30, 2.5 hours to the funeral. I returned home soaked, hair stuck to my face, shoes squishing with every step. I left the flowers on the kitchen table and changed clothes. Put on the same black suit I had chosen that morning, sat in the living room, and waited. The clock advanced with painful slowness. 1 p.m., 1:30, 2. At 2:15 I got up, took the flowers, my keys, my purse, and left for Oakwood Memorial Chapel. The drive took 15 minutes. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray and threatening. The streets were wet, reflecting traffic lights like smears of color on black asphalt. I arrived at the funeral home at 2:40. The building was single-story, white with gray trim. There was a small garden in front with a stone path leading to the main entrance. Cypress trees lined the path. I parked in the small side lot. There were only 3 other cars. One was Justin's. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, watching the entrance. I could see movement through the windows, shadows of people moving inside. I took a deep breath and went in. The interior was exactly as I remembered from Richard's wake. Light beige walls, polished marble floor, soft, warm lighting, quiet organ music playing from hidden speakers. An older man in a black suit approached immediately. "Mrs. Barbara," he said with a soft, professional voice, "we were waiting for you. I'm the director. I am so sorry for your loss." I nodded without speaking. "The main hall is this way." He guided me down a short hall. At the end were double wooden doors, ajar. I could see the golden glow of candles from inside. The director pushed the doors fully open. The room was wide, with rows of folding chairs facing front. At the front was a raised platform, and on it a casket. A shiny mahogany casket, closed, covered with a massive arrangement of white roses and lilies, exactly as they told me on the phone. An empty casket, but no one else knew. There were about a dozen people already seated. I recognized some as Justin's co-workers. Others were Sarah and Justin's neighbors, people I barely knew. And at the front, standing by the casket, was Justin. Our eyes met. He looked terrible, worse than at the hospital. Sunken eyes, red from crying. His black suit hung loose, like he had lost weight in just 3 days. His hair was messy. He looked like a man who had truly lost his wife. But I knew the truth. I walked down the center aisle toward the casket. Every step echoed on the marble floor. All eyes were on me, the shattered mother, the woman who had just lost her only daughter and grandson. I reached the front and stood before the closed casket, touched the smooth wood with my hand. It was cold. I placed my bouquet next to the large arrangement, and then, because I knew everyone was watching, because I knew I had to play the part, I allowed myself to cry. The tears were real. The pain was real, just not for the reasons everyone thought. Justin approached me. "Mrs. Barbara," he whispered. I looked him in the eyes, those eyes that had lied, planned, helped my daughter disappear. But I also saw something else there. Guilt, genuine pain, and love. Love for Sarah, the kind of love that had freed her instead of chaining her. "Thank you for coming," he said with a broken voice. I didn't answer. I sat in the first row. Justin sat next to me. At 3 sharp, the director stood by the casket and began the service. He spoke of loss, of tragedy, of a young life cut short too soon, of a mother and baby who hadn't survived. Every word was a lie. Then he invited people to share memories of Sarah. A neighbor stood up and spoke about how kind Sarah was, how she always waved with a smile. A coworker of Justin's spoke about the few times he met Sarah at company events, how quiet and sweet she seemed. Everyone spoke of a superficial Sarah, the Sarah she showed the world. No one spoke of the real Sarah because no one really knew her. Not even me. Especially not me. Finally, the director looked at me. "Mrs. Barbara, would you like to say a few words?" All eyes turned to me. I stood up slowly, walked to the front and stood by the empty casket. I looked at the few people gathered, and then I looked at the casket. "Sarah," I began with a trembling voice, "was my only daughter, the most important person in my life, the reason I got up every morning." I paused. I thought I knew her better than anyone in the world. I thought I knew what was best for her. I thought that by protecting her, guiding her, making decisions for her, I was helping her have a good and safe life. Tears rolled down my cheeks now. But I was wrong. I was wrong about so many things. I didn't protect her. I caged her. I didn't guide her. I controlled her. I didn't give her love. I gave her a cage. I could hear confused murmurs among the attendees. Justin had gone stiff in his seat. "And now she's gone," I continued. "She's gone in a way I never imagined. and the only thing I have left is regret. The regret of not letting her be who she really wanted to be, of not letting her live her own life. I looked directly at Justin. If I could speak to her one more time, I would tell her I'm sorry. I would tell her I finally understand. And I would tell her that, even though it hurts more than I can express, I let her go. I let her be free, as she always should have been. The silence in the room was absolute. I sat down. The service continued, but I wasn't listening anymore. The director's words became a distant buzz. I could only think of Sarah. Somewhere in this city, probably still at the hospital or maybe already on the way to Seattle, she was alive. She was alive and free. And even though she had broken my heart to get it, she had finally managed to escape. When the service ended, people came to give condolences, hands squeezing mine, words of comfort I couldn't process. Justin stayed until the end. When everyone had left, he approached me one last time. "Mrs. Barbara," he said, voice barely audible. Take care of her," I said, interrupting him. "Take care of her better than I did." His eyes filled with tears. "I will, I promise." "And tell her," my voice broke. "Tell her I love her, that I will always love her, and that I forgive what she did, because I finally understand why she had to do it." Justin nodded, unable to speak. I stood up and walked out of the funeral home without looking back. The empty casket would stay there, a symbol of all the lies we had told each other, but also a symbol of a truth I had finally accepted. I had lost my daughter, not to death, but by my own hand. I left the funeral home under a sky that was starting to darken. It was almost 5 in the afternoon, and winter made night come early. I didn't go straight to my car. Instead, I walked to the small garden beside the building. There was a wrought iron bench under a cypress tree. I sat there, shivering from the cold, staring at nothing. The phone vibrated in my purse. I took it out. Text message from an unknown number. "Thank you." That was it, just that. 2 words. But I knew immediately who it was. Sarah. My fingers trembled over the screen. I wanted to reply. I wanted to write 1,000 things. I wanted to tell her how much I loved her, how much I missed her, how sorry I was for everything. But instead, I wrote just 3 words. "Be happy, daughter." I pressed send. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15. No reply. She had probably thrown away the burner phone she texted from, probably already on the way to Seattle with Justin, leaving behind every trace of her previous life, leaving me behind. I put the phone in my purse, got up from the bench and walked to my car. My legs felt heavy, like walking underwater. I got in the car and drove home in complete silence. When I arrived, the house was dark and cold. I had left in such a hurry in the morning I hadn't left a light on. I entered and closed the door behind me. The silence was different now, more definitive, more permanent. Not just the silence of an empty house. It was the silence of a house that would always be empty. I turned on the living room lights. Everything was exactly as I left it. The armchair where I sat so many times waiting for Sarah to visit. The coffee table with the photo albums I had taken out yesterday. Yesterday. Seemed like a year ago. I walked to the kitchen and made tea. Not because I wanted to drink it, but because I needed to do something with my hands. Something routine. Something normal. While waiting for the water to boil, I looked around the kitchen. On the fridge door were old photos held by magnets. Sarah at 5, at 10, at 15. In none of those photos did she look truly happy. Now I understood. The water boiled. I made the tea and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Sarah and I had breakfast together thousands of times. Use this plate, not that one. Eat more vegetables. Not so fast, you'll choke. Sit up straight. Even during something as simple as breakfast, I had been controlling her, telling her how to sit, what to eat, how to behave. I drank the tea without really tasting it. When I finished, I washed the cup and left it drying in the rack. Then I went up the stairs to the second floor, past my room, and went straight to Sarah's room. I turned on the light. The room lit up, showing everything exactly as it had been for the last 3 years since she got married. The perfectly made bed, the tidy desk, the photos on the wall. I walked to the closet and opened it. All those clothes I had chosen for her hung there like ghosts of past decisions. I pulled out a dress, mint green, short sleeves, a bow at the waist. I had bought it for her when she was 16. I remembered the day perfectly. Sarah had wanted a different dress, a red one, sleeveless, more youthful. That one is too flashy. This green one is much more appropriate. You'll look like a polite young lady. Sarah had tried on the green dress in the store. She had looked in the mirror and said nothing, just nodded and kept it on while I paid. Now, holding that dress in my hands, I realized something. I had never seen her wear it, not once. She probably hung it in the closet as soon as we got home, and never touched it again. I left the dress on the bed and took out more clothes. Blouses, skirts, pants. All chosen by me. All approved by me. Nothing chosen by her. I started pulling all the clothes out of the closet, piled them on the bed until it formed a mountain of colored fabric I had considered appropriate, but Sarah had probably hated. When the closet was completely empty, I sat on the floor and cried. Cried for all the lost years, for all the decisions I had made for her, for all the times I had silenced her voice, thinking I knew better. I cried until no more tears were left. When I finally could get up, it was almost 8 at night. My knees and back hurt from sitting on the floor for hours. I went down to the kitchen. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Linda. Probably wanted to know how the funeral was. I didn't call back. Wasn't ready to talk to anyone. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of red wine Richard had saved for a special occasion that never came. Opened it and poured a glass. Sat in the living room with the wine, looking at the photos still on the coffee table. In one of them, Sarah was about 12. We were in the garden. I was standing behind her with hands on her shoulders. We both looked at the camera. I smiled widely. Sarah didn't smile, mouth in a straight line, eyes blank. How had I not seen it before? How had I been so blind for so many years? I drank the wine slowly, then poured another glass, and another. I wasn't used to drinking. The alcohol made me feel dizzy, but at least it numbed the pain a little. At 10 p.m., the doorbell rang. I got up with difficulty from the chair, feeling the world spin slightly around me. Walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Justin. He was standing on my porch, in the same funeral clothes, wet from the drizzle that had started falling again. I opened the door. "Mrs. Barbara," he said with a hoarse voice. "I need to talk to you." "There is nothing left to talk about," I replied. "Please," he pleaded, "just a few minutes." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I stepped aside and let him in. Justin entered the living room, stood there, unsure, hands in pockets. "Sit," I said, pointing to the armchair. He sat. I sat in the chair opposite him. "Why are you here?" I asked directly. "Shouldn't you be on the way to Seattle already?" Justin looked at me with surprise. You know?" "I know everything," I said. "I was at the hospital Friday at midnight. I heard you talking in the bathroom. The color drained from his face. Mrs. Barbara, You don't have to explain anything, I interrupted. I understand why you did it. She didn't want to hurt you, he said with a broken voice. But Sarah, she couldn't take it anymore. You have to understand. I understand, I said. Believe me, I understand. Justin covered his face with his hands. She asked me to come, to make sure you were okay. She didn't want to leave without knowing. Where is she now? I asked. Still at the hospital. We leave tomorrow early morning. Everything is ready. I nodded slowly. Tell her I'm okay. Tell her she can go in peace. Mrs. Barbara, what you said at the funeral, Sarah needed to hear those words years ago. I know, I whispered. I know. Justin stood up. I'm going to take care of her, I promise. I'm going to let her be whoever she wants to be. I'm going to love her without conditions, without control. That's all I ever wanted for her, I said. I just didn't know how to give it to her. Justin walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned to me one last time. Sarah loves you, you know. Despite everything, she loves you. But she needed to get away to be able to breathe. I know, I said, and I love her enough to let her go. Justin went out into the rainy night. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it. It was official now. Sarah would leave tomorrow, start a new life in a city where no one knew her, where no one knew about the controlling mother she left behind. I had lost my daughter, not to death, as everyone thought. I had lost her because I had loved her the wrong way for 28 years. And that loss hurt more than anything else I had experienced. I still ask myself if I did the right thing. And you? What would you have done in my place? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room until the sun began to rise, watched the darkness slowly turn into pale gray, then into golden tones filtering through the windows. Tuesday, December 29th, the day Sarah would disappear from my life forever. At 7 in the morning, I got up from the chair. My muscles were stiff. Walked to the kitchen and made coffee. While drinking it, I looked out the window to the backyard. The rose bushes moved gently with the morning breeze. The sky was clear after yesterday's rain. A new day, a new beginning, but not for me. I went up to my room and changed clothes. Comfortable pants, simple sweater, no black. I had enough of black. Then went to Sarah's room. The mountain of clothes I had pulled from the closet was still on the bed. I looked at it for a long moment, then started folding it systematically, garment by garment. Packed it into cardboard boxes I got from the garage. 3 boxes full of clothes Sarah had never wanted, but had to wear for years. Took them down to the garage. Tomorrow I'd take them to donation. Returned to the room. Now the closet was empty, walls bare, space open, exactly as it should have been from the start. A space for Sarah to fill with her own choices. Although it was too late for her to fill it. I took down the photos from the wall, the ones I had selected and framed. Put them in another box. Removed the bedspread, the one with floral designs I considered appropriate. Little by little, I dismantled the room I had created for Sarah. The room that reflected my tastes, my preferences, my control. When I finished, the room was almost empty. Only basic furniture remained. Bed without linens, clean desk, open empty closet, a blank slate. I closed the room door and went downstairs. It was 11 a.m. If Justin told the truth, they were probably already on the way to Seattle, a long flight. They would arrive by mid-afternoon and start their new life. Sarah, Justin, and their baby, a family, without me. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. I needed to write. I needed to put into words everything I had learned these last 4 days. I began to write. Dear Sarah, I know you will never read this letter. I know I will probably never send it, but I need to write it anyway. I have spent the last 28 years of my life believing I knew what was best for you, believing that by controlling every aspect of your life, I was protecting you. But I was wrong. I wasn't protecting you, I was drowning you. I chose your clothes because I thought I knew what looked best, but I never asked what you liked. I chose your career because I thought it was safest, but never let you chase your dreams. I drove away your friends because I thought they weren't good influences, but really, I was afraid they would take you away from me. I visited your house constantly, claiming I wanted to make sure you were okay. But the truth is, I couldn't stand not having control over your life. And when you got pregnant, I decorated the nursery without asking what you wanted, because I thought I knew better. Because I never learned to let go. You had to fake your own death to escape me. And that tells me everything I need to know about the kind of mother I was. I want you to know I let you go, completely, without resentment, without trying to find you, without interfering in your new life. I want you to know I regret every time I silenced your voice. Every time I made decisions for you. Every time I made you feel you weren't enough, just as you were. You were perfect. You always were. I was the one who was broken. Be happy, my baby girl. Live the life you always wanted to live. Be the mother I never could be. Let your son grow free, with space to make his own mistakes and decisions. And if someday, in many years, you decide you want me to be part of your life again, I will be here, waiting. Not to control, just to love. I love you more than words can express, and because I love you, I let you go. Your mother, Barbara. I folded the letter and put it in an envelope, wrote "For Sarah" on the front, then put it in my nightstand drawer next to the rosary my mother gave me years ago. Maybe someday Sarah would read it, maybe not, but I needed to write it anyway. I spent the rest of the day doing simple things, cleaned the house top to bottom, did laundry, pruned the rose bushes in the yard I had neglected for months, kept my hands busy so my mind wouldn't think too much. When night fell, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea. The air was cold, but I had a thick sweater. Stars began appearing in the dark sky. Somewhere in Seattle, Sarah was alive, free, starting the life she always wanted. And I was here, alone in this too big house, learning to live with the consequences of my actions. But there was something different now. For the first time in 28 years, I didn't feel the need to control anything. I didn't feel panic, not knowing exactly where Sarah was or what she was doing. I didn't feel the impulse to call her, check she was okay, give unsolicited advice. I just felt peace. A sad, painful peace, but peace nonetheless. I had done the right thing letting her go. Not because it was easy, but precisely because it was the hardest thing I had ever done. And in that moment of silent clarity under the stars, I understood something fundamental. True love doesn't clutch. True love gives freedom, even when that freedom means staying alone. The days after the funeral passed in a strange monotony. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. People in the neighborhood looked at me with pity when I went to the market, whispered among themselves, Poor Mrs. Barbara lost her only daughter. What a horrible tragedy. I accepted their condolences with a silent nod and kept moving. Linda called every day. Every day I told her I was okay, just needed time. Finally, she stopped insisting on coming to see me. The house felt different now. Emptier, yes, but also more honest. There were no longer photos of Sarah everywhere, constantly reminding me of what I lost. I had put them all in a box in the closet, not because I wanted to forget her, but because I needed to stop living in the past. Saturday morning, a week after Justin called with the fake news, I got an unexpected call. It was Justin's mother, Mrs. Higgins, a 72-year-old woman who lived in Arizona and whom I barely knew. We had only met at the wedding and a couple of family gatherings. "Mrs. Barbara," she said with a trembling voice, "how are you?" "Surviving," I answered honestly. "Me too," she sighed. "I can't believe my Justin, that he—" She stopped. I heard her sobbing on the other end. "What happened?" I asked, heart accelerating. "He called me yesterday, from Seattle. He told me he got a job transfer, that he and Sarah had decided to move there to start over, away from painful memories." I stayed silent. "But Mrs. Barbara, Sarah is dead. Why would he tell me she is with him? Why would he lie to me like that? I'm so worried. I think he's having a nervous breakdown. I think the loss has affected him so much he's imagining things." I closed my eyes. Of course, Justin hadn't told his own mother the truth. She thought Sarah was really dead, and now she thought her son had lost his mind. "Mrs. Higgins," I said carefully, "Justin is okay, believe me." "But how can he be okay? He talks as if Sarah were alive, as if they planned this move together. It makes no sense." "Sometimes grief makes us say strange things," I said. "Give him time." "I want to go to Seattle to see him, but he gave me an address, and when I looked it up on the map, it doesn't exist. Why would he give me a fake address? What is he hiding?" "Because he doesn't want you to find him," I thought, "because the lie extends beyond me." "Maybe he made a mistake with the address," I suggested. "Give him a few days and call again." Mrs. Higgins sighed deeply. "You're right. I'm being overprotective. I've always been with Justin. He's my only son, you know." "I know," I said. "I was overprotective with my daughter too." We hung up shortly after. I sat with the phone thinking. Justin would now have to lie to his mother for the rest of his life. Would have to invent excuses why he could never visit, why he could never send current photos of Sarah, why his mother could never meet her grandson. He had chosen to give Sarah freedom, but that choice came with a price. Isolation, constant lies, living always looking over his shoulder. It wasn't a punishment I imposed. It was the natural consequence of his own actions. Days kept passing. Sunday, Monday. Monday was Christmas Eve. Normally, Sarah and Justin would have come for dinner. I would have made the full menu. We would have dined together, the last two women of our small family. But this year, the house was silent. I made a simple dinner for myself. Roast chicken, rice, salad. Set the table for one. Ate alone, looking at the empty chair where Sarah used to sit. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to wonder how she was. Did she find a doctor in Seattle? Was she taking care of herself? Was the baby okay? Boy or girl? Had they picked a name? Did Sarah think of me sometimes? Did she feel guilt or just relief? After dinner, I sat in the living room with the Christmas tree lights I had finally put up that day. White, twinkling lights. Simple, no fancy ornaments. The phone rang. Unknown local number. I answered with caution. Mrs. Barbara? It was a woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes. This is Dr. Mendez. I was your daughter Sarah's obstetrician. My heart stopped. Yes. I'm sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve, and I am so sorry for your loss. Sarah was a wonderful patient. I waited, not knowing what to say. The reason for my call is, well, I found something strange in the hospital files. According to our records, Sarah had her last appointment with me 2 weeks ago. She was perfectly healthy, no complications. Baby was fine. Uh-huh, I said, voice tense. But then I see there is a death certificate dated December 28th. Complications during childbirth, postpartum hemorrhage. She paused. Mrs. Barbara, I didn't attend that birth. No doctor from my department did. And when I checked the emergency admission records for that night, there is no record of Sarah being admitted. The silence stretched between us. It is very strange, the doctor continued, and frankly, worrying. I have reported the inconsistency to hospital administration. They are going to investigate how a death certificate could be issued without a corresponding admission. I closed my eyes. Doctor, I said slowly, I appreciate your call, but I ask you to let this matter go. Excuse me? My daughter is gone, I said. That is the only truth that matters. Everything else, let it be. There was a long pause. I understand, the doctor said finally, though her voice made clear she didn't understand at all. If you need to talk to someone, if there is something else going on. There is nothing else, I said firmly. Thank you for your concern. I hung up, stared at the phone. The lie was starting to fray. Someone had noticed the inconsistencies. Soon others would too. Justin thought he could create a perfect fake death, but reality always finds a way to leak through the cracks. And then I understood something. This was also part of karmic justice. I had spent 28 years building a life based on control and lies, telling myself I knew better. And now I lived in an even bigger lie, a lie that eventually would be discovered. A lie that would force me to face uncomfortable questions from neighbors, relatives, doctors. It wasn't a punishment imposed by someone else. It was simply life returning exactly what I had sown for decades. Christmas arrived the next day, Tuesday, December 25th. I woke up alone in my silent house. No gifts under the tree, no calls from Sarah wishing me Merry Christmas, as happened every year since she was born. Just silence. I spent the day tidying, cleaning, keeping hands busy. At sunset, I sat on the back porch with coffee, sky turning orange and pink as the sun set. And I thought of Sarah. Somewhere in Seattle, she was probably celebrating her first free Christmas, without having to come to my house, without following my rules, without pretending to be someone she wasn't. Probably the happiest Christmas of her life. And I was alone, completely alone. But it was the loneliness I had created with my own hands. She had once called me controlling. I thought she was exaggerating, that she was young and didn't understand everything I did was for her good. But she was right. She had always been right. And now I paid the price. Not because someone was punishing me, but because this was the natural and inevitable consequence of my own choices. Life always collects its debts. Sometimes it just takes 28 years. Today is Saturday, January 28th. Exactly 1 month since my life split into before and after. I sit by the window, looking at the blooming rose bushes, wild and free against the stucco. Yesterday, a letter arrived with no return address, postmarked Seattle. Inside was a photo of a sleeping newborn, Richie, it said on the back, and a note from Sarah telling me she's finally breathing, studying architecture, and that Justin is a good man. She thanked me for letting them go. I hung Richie's photo on the empty wall of her old room. Just that, a reminder that life continues, that love isn't possession, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. I've learned that the greatest act of love is freedom, even when it leaves you alone in a quiet house. My story ends here, but yours continues. Don't wait until it's too late to learn the difference between holding a hand and chaining a soul.